Welcome back to The Chosen Journey with Steve Karsay. Steve, we are on chapter 10. Can you believe that?
I know time flies, right? Especially when we talk about different things going on and the journeys people are taking. It's a lot of fun, and things are moving right along.
It's I'd like to say maybe it's 80-90% baseball, but there's a lot of life in there in between. And your life, a little bit of my life, people's lives that intertwined. It's amazing the people that touch us and how they do affect their journey. The more we go through these chapters, I'm realizing more and more why you wanted this to be the journey and not the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought a lot about it when we discussed what we were doing, and it just came down to what it is in general about people's lives. People's lives take so many twists and turns. Your life has, my life has, and I know so many people who listen to us. Their lives go down different paths. So it's fun to take a journey. There's some adversity along the way, and it's one of those things that when you talk about it, it really helps heal.
I gotta tell you, as far as the journey wise, and there'll be memories as far as memory lane goes, but also memories of what's going on when we actually filmed it. And when we had our discussion before we jumped in today, I let you know that I got a shoulder thing today, and it's been going on for a few days now, and it's my non-pitching arm, so to speak. But I gotta tell you, buddy, I'm not a pitcher, but when you got this sharp pain going and it feels like somebody is like taking scissors and just stabbing you constantly, I told you I have a newfound appreciation for the pitching brotherhood because I never experienced this kind of pain before. And when you throw the amount of innings, the amount of pitches you do, how often you get the barking shoulder, so to speak.
Well, it takes its toll. I mean, it's an unnatural motion throwing a baseball. That's why a lot of guys get injured. And when you throw it at high velocities, like guys are capable of doing today, and how they train for it, sometimes things happen, and whether it's your elbow or your shoulder, and obviously your shoulder's barking a little bit, so you kind of have an understanding of certain things that you do during the day. You go grab something and it'll catch, or it just doesn't feel great at times, and that's what players go through, whether you're a position player or especially a pitcher, because you're throwing off a mound that's elevated. You're throwing overhand, you're throwing curveballs, you're throwing splits, you're throwing changeups, you're manipulating the ball, and you're doing certain things that you weren't meant to do with the baseball. But that's part of the game, and guys understand that. But that's why they train their arms. That's why it takes time to come back from an injury, and get to the point where you can sustain, the pitching portion of it with how many pitches you're going to throw.
I kind of feel like as a player, when you're making that decision, when you're feeling something and then the decision, do I tell the coach? Do I not tell the coach? I can work through this because, even like now, I can lift it up. I can go lift weights, no problem. But the thing is, I know if I'm going to do certain things with it, I could potentially make it worse. And I feel like players that play through it and all of a sudden the stats are affected, they're saying, what's the deal with the stats? Oh, now they're making excuses because they're injured. But if they're saying, you know what, I'm injured, you know what, I shouldn't take the chance, I'm going to go on the injured reserve, then they're damned as well. Like, you're almost in a no-win position that way.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it comes down to each player, and how much you can call it pain or what you can withstand. But when you're loose and you're warm, it's a lot different story. And then it's when you cool down and you have to recover, and then you wake up the next day, is usually when it stiffens up and gets sore. But each individual player has a certain threshold. Pain threshold is what I call it. And certain guys can pitch through certain things where other guys can't, and it's just part of it. You kind of have to identify and understand what is sore, and what is actually hurt, or an injury portion of it, because there's a difference between the two. Guys can be sore and play through the soreness, but when you're hurt, it's much more difficult to sustain the level that you want to play at and be successful.
So Nolan Ryan, was he actually human or a robot? Because I remember watching him through all those years, all those games, all those no hitters. How did the man do it? Is it like a freak of nature, or is it just good genetics? What, you know, that you rarely see the kind of numbers and what a Nolan Ryan does, back then and in this day and age.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. He's a freak of nature. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason. He was just able to repeat his mechanics. He was able to have a consistent release point. He had obviously a very talented and gifted arm to be able to throw that hard for such a period of time. But he worked out, he trained, he did the things that he felt like he needed to do uh, to stay in shape and to keep his arm in shape. And he was one of the lucky ones. He was capable of going out there every fifth day, making sometimes 45 starts in a year back in the day when that was a thing. He was throwing 300 innings, I think, a couple of times. Yeah, you barely see 200 innings today, and he was throwing 300. And it's just amazing what he was able to do, and that's why he's one of the greats in the game.
How many, and also in pitches per game, right? Like complete games, left, right, and center. Pitch counts meant nothing at that point. Un Unfreaking believable, when I reflect back on it. I no, I think it was the football. I think when he started that trend, remember tossing the football and everybody thought, oh, tossing the football is gonna be a thing. Did that ever catch on in different major league camps as far as you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing today. If you go there for batting practice or whatnot, you'll see certain teams, their guys throw footballs. It's actually a really good drill. It gets your hand in the right position. It makes you shorten up a little bit, and if you can throw a spiral with a football, that means you probably can throw a pretty good slider. So it's very similar hand position to what guys are able to do. And when I was with the Brewers, we used to throw the football all the time in the outfield before we went through our throwing program.
I was gonna ask you if that's something you brought to your pitchers as a coach, or is that something that was already in place at the time when you came in?
No, it was already in place. I mean, we did it when I was in Cleveland in the minor leagues. Guys would bring a football out. Guys enjoy football. Guys use it running around in the outfield to get their legs loose and just to have a little bit of fun. Baseball is a long season, as we talked about, and it can become a bit of a grind. So for them to have fun doing something else, as long as it's not injury detrimental to their arm or what they're doing, I say go for it.
Love it. Love it. You know what? It's just a good mentality for people to understand as far as how training goes, and then as far as conditioning goes. But you know what? For us everyday Joes, you know what? We can get it too. You never know. You never know. Now, today's topic in the chapter is getting drafted in the first round. It's something we agreed upon that we're going to discuss. And you said it was very dear to your heart that you wanted to tell the story. And as I was marinating and putting this together, I was thinking if you could walk us through the mentality before getting drafted, what it's like in high school, and the whole process getting into it. I don't think it's always as glamorous as people think it is.
Yeah, I mean, the draft is a lot different today than it was in the late 80s and in obviously 1990 when I got drafted. There wasn't the social media, there wasn't all of these lists of prospects, there wasn't, computers that were, you know, getting all of the information and spitting it out to the scouts. Now a lot of teams scout from a computer in general. There's not as many physical people or physical scouts going out there and watching games all the time. And that's kind of how it's changed a little bit. But at the end of the day, when I got drafted, it was a scout there that was looking at me. He wrote my name down. He started following me. It got put into the Major League Baseball database, and then that's shared within the realms of the teams at that particular time, and then they go out and look at who they want to.
Oh, so it wasn't like 20 something scouts following you around every single game in high school.
No, but scouts, they read, they figure it out. Usually scouts like to try to find the diamond in the rough, right? I mean, they're the ones out, hitting the pavement. They go into these little towns and in these states, whether it's Louisiana or Texas or California, and they go to these places and try to find somebody that nobody else is on. But that's hard to do these days because of, again, social media and all of the perfect games and these tournament travel baseball teams. All the kids are playing it, and all of the good ones get noticed. And there's no like diamond in the rough anymore for these guys. And there's not a ton of scouts going out and pounding the pavement anymore because of the computers. But it was just one of those things. I had a couple scouts, looking at me, and especially when I was a senior in high school. And I just went out there and played the game and pitched and did well, and the opportunity presented itself.
Like, just to put in perspective for the people listening at home, and again, we always say hit the subscribe button, hit the like, put the comments in, because as you're listening in, we want to hear your feedback, and you will make it on the episode as long as you keep it pretty clean. But we do love to have the interaction, certainly. But imagine the way we have the interaction today, and you're watching it. In Steve and I's day, there was no MLB network running 24/7. There was no MLB.com, MILB.com. There was none of that stuff where everything was at your fingertips. Now you could turn on your TV and watch 4 games at once, at least maybe 6 games. Back then, you're watching regional games pretty much. It wasn't that easy to get outside games. So there wasn't as much access to the information, to the prospects, the futures game, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Forget about that. There's no such thing like that. So if you wanted to know those can't miss prospects, there's very few that you're going to hear about unless you were actually in that region. Would you say that's fair?
That's very fair. I mean, growing up in New York, I had the Mets and the Yankees, right? And then I had the Saturday game of the week. And whoever they put on TV on the Saturday game of the week, that's who I watched. I didn't get to flip on DirecTV and pop onto a Brewers game or pop onto a Cincinnati Reds game if that's the team that I liked and wanted to watch it. It was a regional game. It was your hometown team, essentially. I was lucky that I had 2 growing up in New York, so I got to watch both. A little bit more baseball. Obviously, that's why TBS came about, and they started playing the Atlanta Braves games, right, with Ted Turner, and they became a national hit. And that's why a lot of people like the Braves, because that was like one of the first teams that was, fully around the United States because of the cable station to watch
Right.
the Braves play.
And so in your draft class going into that year, we were talking off air at the end of our last chapter, and a name you threw in, a pitcher's name that was really highly touted at the time, went pretty high. His name was
Todd Van Poppel.
Todd Poppel. And it's interesting because you know how everything segues, even though I don't intend it to.
Yeah,
People
absolutely.
who are people comparing him at the time to?
Roger Clemens.
Roger Clemens, Nolan Ryan, because of the whole
Oh,
association, right?
Texas thing. That's right. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. He went 14th overall to the A's. So
Yeah.
he was planning on going to college and the University of Texas as well. So it was one of those things where the A's, I think, went out on a limb and chose him with the 14th pick as well.
But it was like, you don't really get to hear about them, first of all, at all. And if you do, there's a big reason why, but there's a lot of pressure that goes into it. And even though they're highly touted, they may not even go that high. When you were going into this, it's funny because when we talk off air, I think to myself, oh, I wish I kept recording because I wish people could hear this. So now we're going to go back to the memory banks and talk about that a bit because of where your draft position was and where you could have gone. And it's not so simple. There's politics involved with that. So let's hear more about Steve Karsay's story in getting drafted in your draft year.
Yeah, so senior year, we're coming down to the end of it. I had signed a letter of intent to go play at LSU at the time, college down in Louisiana. They were very good. I was fortunate enough to be able to get seen by those coaches and the people who recruit high school players to go to college. So I had signed my letter of intent there. Continue on playing the rest of the season. I had a high school coach, not the coach who was coaching our team at the particular time, but one who was at the school, who asked me to go to Christ the King to go play, and he ended up getting fired before I became a senior. But he always helped me. He was always a nice guy in doing that, which I thought he was a nice guy. But he ended up, trying to go, behind my back and get a job with LSU if I got the sign there. And then as the draft was coming up, he was telling Major League Baseball, which is the scouting association, that I wasn't going to sign. I was going to college no matter what. And if you draft him, you're going to waste a draft pick on him if you draft him in the top 5 or the top 10. So without my knowledge, all of this stuff was going on, and draft day came. Again, I'm pretty naive to the situation back then. I was just playing the game, and my sights were set on LSU, particularly because I wanted to go to college, not knowing that I would get drafted in the first round. Pick 22 came around. The Toronto Blue Jays had that pick, and they took a shot on me and chose me with the 22nd pick in the first round. I got a phone call later that day after we finished our city championship game for high school at Yankee Stadium, which we ended up losing 2-1. And I got a call later on that night when I got home, and the Blue Jays told me that they drafted me in the first round.
Now, you were telling me, though, that the Blue Jays did go to some extent to find you and to speak with you. Wherever you were located, you were going through some personal circumstances at that point. And if you want to let us know more about that.
Yeah, so the coach at that particular time who was negotiating on my behalf, little did I know,
without your knowledge.
Without my knowledge, I didn't know he was negotiating on my behalf with the Blue Jays, and he was trying to wrangle a job with them, saying, "Hey, if you give me X job, I can get Steve to sign," and things like that. So at the end of the day, I didn't know that was going on. My mom was in the hospital at that particular time. She was going through a surgery and whatnot. And next thing I know, I get a phone call from the Toronto Blue Jays saying and asking me if I'm going to want to play professional baseball or if I am going to college. They're having a hard time negotiating with my representative. And I kind of took a double take on the phone, and I was like, my representative, I don't have anybody that is negotiating for me. We went through the story about that then, and they came down to New York, and we met at a diner next to the hospital.
They being who?
Gord Ash and Pat Gillick. And then I had a conversation with them at the diner. We went through the process, and they gave me a few days to work through what I wanted to do. And at the end of the few days, I had a talk with my family. My mom was recovering well, and they came in, and I decided that I wanted to play professional baseball, and I decided to negotiate my signing bonus on my own, and off we went.
You're how old at this point?
I'm 18.
You're 18. 18 with Pat Gillick and Gord Ash. Two of the shrewdest negotiators in baseball history with an 18-year-old. A little bit intimidating, would you say?
I was naive. I had no idea what was going on. I knew I wanted to play professional baseball at that time. I threw out a number to them, and before I could even get it out of my mouth, they agreed to it. So I think I probably cheated myself out a little bit of money at that time, but at the end of the day, it all worked out.
It's a much different time now. It's funny when you read the draft stories of at least the first rounders, if not the second rounders, everybody has pre-signed bonuses. Everybody knows slots. We know the slots as far as, am I going above slot, below slot? Again, no such thing at this point whatsoever. We're not thinking about caps at this point. It was just a different world back then.
Yeah, there's no secrets today. Guys know that they're going to get drafted in the first round for the most part. When they know they're going to get drafted in the first round within the first 10 picks, they've pretty much agreed to the contract that they're going to sign, and then it just becomes pomp and circumstance after that.
Blows my mind, though, that they drafted you and you actually had no idea they were going to do it until they actually pulled the trigger. I wonder how far they knew into it, that they were planning it. Did they relay any of that information to you, or did they keep their cards to the vest, so to speak?
Oh, they kept their cards to the vest, but they didn't think I was getting to the number 22 pick. They were actually shocked that I had fell to number 22. And if you think about it, I think it was a year or two before that, maybe 89, they did the same thing with John Nolan, and he had told them about not signing and whatnot. And he ended up getting drafted by Toronto and signing and had a great career there. But yeah, they didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't even know I was going to get drafted in the first round, to be quite honest with you. I just kind of played the game, and things just transpired.
I actually was at John Olerud's first major league game, by the way. That's
Very nice.
I was at David Wells' premiere. I was at John Olerud's. I've attended a couple of baseball games in my life, but I remember like the man just threw himself right into the majors, which was the most obscene thing, and so difficult to do. Especially back then. Back then, everybody had some sort of seasoning in the minors. That was the thing. You never even thought of somebody coming straight up, right?
Yeah, it's another way the game has changed, right? There's a lot of younger players in the big leagues because of salary and how they're able to suppress salaries and get the payroll to where they want it to be. The middle class is kind of getting cut out a little bit between the $3 and $6 million players. They'd rather go with a younger guy, and that's just the way the game has changed. But usually early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, you had a 25-man roster. When you broke spring training, those 25 guys were your team unless there was a major injury. And then, you'd have a couple IL stints, or DL stints is what they called it back then. And guys would get shuffled up and down, but not like it is today.
No, and that's one of the things, you read a lot. And again, I think social media has a lot to do with this. We're saying the person is hitting, they're raking, they're pitching so well. You got to bring them up. We need them immediately. We need them immediately. And then they come and some take off like a lightning storm and some falter and they'll say, oh, no, you ruined them. You brought them up too soon. You can win. I know Vladdy Guerrero Jr. over here, there was always a debate with it, and why wasn't he hitting the second he got over here? And people don't imagine, the amount of pressure today versus 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. Imagine what it was like back in the 50s, right? But every day people are on it. Everybody's reading on every social media, they're chatting in the chat boards, and we're analyzing every single game, every single pitch, every single bat. It's such a different game today. And especially those contracts, people that have never played one single game, and some of them are signing over some 5-7 year contracts. And back when you were a rookie, we never heard of that. We never would have imagined that.
Yeah, that just didn't happen back then. No matter how good you were, you kind of went through the transition of being a rookie and then playing your second and third year and trying to get the arbitration before anybody even thought about a multi-year deal. Juan DeFranco is a great example, right?
Yes.
He had a great half a year, and then he comes up and they give him $180 million for, I think it was 11 years or 12 years or whatever it is, and they're taking a gamble on that, but they think he's going to be a tremendous player for that organization for a long time, and that's their prerogative, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
if that's what they want to do and they feel like that's the best move financially for them, they can do it. But other teams just don't work in that fashion. Tampa has to do that because the way they run their team and the way the payroll is.
It's a revolving door. And I think of the Astros, and Singleton was a first base prospect. Can't miss. The man could rake, but you know what? It didn't work out. But some people take the financial security, some don't. It's Juan Soto in Washington, and there's a giant debate. Should he have taken the money in New York? Aaron Judge, should he have taken the money? And we start debating those aspects, and at some point, it's guys, let's just play the game, let's enjoy, and that stuff will just settle itself out at the end of the day. You decide whether you're going to bet on yourself or you're not, right?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like you look at Judge, and he's already made a really nice, good chunk of change. It's not like he's scraping for money by any means. Through his first 5 years, he has probably a lot of money in the bank, so he can bet on himself. When guys don't have a lot of money in the bank, and you never know what injuries can kind of occur, especially with a pitcher, they're more apt to take that long-term deal at an earlier age and get secure with their family and a nice contract.
I think especially when you're a young prospect coming to a new country and you don't have the schooling, you maybe didn't even barely went to high school. English might be your second, third, fourth language, right? You have here your people you trust, and you don't know which direction to go in. That can be very difficult as well. Imagine, for example, I took you and I threw you in Europe, and now you're playing baseball in Europe, and nobody speaks English there, and you have no representation. You have to go do your negotiation the way you did. But you're in a whole different country plus a different language. I can't imagine how they go about it.
It's a huge transition. from a Latin country to the American way of life. Just the little things, doing your laundry, going out to get and order food, getting into a routine. There are a lot of things that these guys, really need to learn before getting to the big leagues, because it's a fast lifestyle. It really is, and you can kind of get in a lot of trouble if you don't have a good head on your shoulders.
And I don't know what the percentage of Spanish-speaking players in MLB is, but it's pretty high. And constant debate when they're hiring coaches, hiring managers is how many Spanish-speaking do we have, and are we assimilating people? It's there's so many more considered because the game has gotten so global, and I think with the World Baseball Classic, we're going to see it even more as more countries start to grow the game, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Being a bilingual coach is definitely sought after these days, with the amount of players that are on the roster that do speak Spanish. So that's kind of the way it is, and it's a good thing to have a bilingual coach on the team, because sometimes if there wasn't a guy who spoke great English, I was able to go to that coach and with the player and have a conversation through the other coach to have him understand what I was trying to, convey to him and get across to him.
Because you were telling me in a previous chapter about playing winter ball. When you played winter ball, was there any issues as far as English speaking there? Did you have coaches that didn't speak English at all, or everybody figured out a way?
No, I only played 1 year of winter ball, and I played in Puerto Rico. So there was a lot of, obviously, American guys down there, and Puerto Rico being part of the U.S. Islands, they spoke very good English.
So we go the other way, though, as far as you being a coach, going up the minor ranks and in the majors. Did you encounter pitchers that did not speak English or very poorly? And did you have any kind of issues that way as far as communication goes?
There was a few, definitely, especially in the minor leagues when you're young. They come over from the Latin countries and they haven't gone through their English classes yet, which most teams provide in a different setting in spring training or in instructional league. They go through that, but yeah, in the young levels, there are a lot of guys who aren't fluent in English and have a hard time understanding. That you can kind of get the point across to them, but then for them to absorb the information is a lot tougher than a guy who is fluent in English and can understand it well. So I would always have a coach that I knew in that particular team or player that I could always go to and use them as a tool to get the point across and to get the player to have a good understanding of what I was trying to teach.
So, from a transition standpoint, now going back into your shoes, when you finish off in that diner, you finish your negotiation with Mr. Gillick, Mr. Ash, make the decision. Walk us through what happens from there. Was there a press conference back in those days, and then what is the transition to when you finally became a member of the Blue Jays organization?
Yeah, so no press conference. The scout for the Blue Jays out of New York was there. He had obviously was sat in on the conversation. We got the paperwork, we signed it. They said, okay, in 2 days, the scout's going to bring you up to Auburn, New York, and you're going to meet St. Catharines in Auburn, New York, and start your professional career. And that's what happened. I packed my stuff up. I got on a plane with the scout. We landed in Syracuse, New York, got in a car, met the team in Auburn, New York. I got dropped off, and my professional career started.
2 days later.
2 days later.
So it's not like, hey, take a week, go take some vacation, start prepping yourself mentally, start packing up. No, you're a hired gun. It's time to go.
You sign that dotted line. You're their property. You're part of their organization, and they want you there to start learning and preparing yourself, hopefully, to get to the big leagues.
How much of a whirlwind is that? Like 1 minute, you're at home, and the next minute you're off to meet the team.
That's always a whirlwind. I mean, I didn't know who I was going to meet. I didn't really know anybody on the team. I was walking into, the unknown essentially. I got to Auburn, New York, and I looked at the field, and the first thing I thought of to myself was, oh my God, I gave up LSU for this, because the field was terrible. I mean, it was like a high school field, and I'm like, oh my goodness. But I transitioned pretty well. I made, I think, 5 starts and pitched pretty well, and ended up finishing the season with only 5 starts in St. Catharines because they were protecting me coming out of high school and doing all that stuff. And then went to instructional league, and that's kind of where, I got the full introduction to the organization and to all the coaches and all the front office and all the players that I had long relationships with throughout the minor leagues.
Any memories of St. Catharines?
Small little town, about an hour and a half from Toronto. It was nice. It was small. The field was great. I lived with a few of the guys that had been drafted and were with the Blue Jays at that time. The Blue Jays had a gentleman by the name of Scott Burrell, who was a basketball player at UConn, and we lived together for a few months.
Believe it or not, you go buy a house now in St. Catharines in the year 2022, it's probably easily 800,000 for a detached house.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? It's a long ways away from 1990. Don't get me wrong, but
Yes.
there was like a couple restaurants to go eat at, and they treated the players well because that was kind of their little thing in St. Catharines was their A-ball team from the Blue Jays.
And that first off season, what was that like?
Not much. I mean, after I got done with the season, I went to instructional league. Instructional league lasted for 6 weeks. Got done around Halloween. Went home, tried to decompress and have an understanding and prepare for the next year. And I went down to spring training, basically 2 months later, down to Florida, and prepped in Florida in warm weather instead of being in New York. And then went and got put on the Myrtle Beach Hurricanes team and started another season after that.
It's amazing. It's amazing how quickly it goes and the time flies, eh?
Yeah, time flies. Like you think back about how those seasons went, and it seems long at that time, but it goes so fast. I mean, 140 games in the minor leagues flies by now.
That guy behind my shoulder there with the mismatched pants and jersey,
Yeah, that was St. Catharines. Actually, that was down in Dunedin, Florida during spring training that they took that picture. But yeah, that was 18 or 19 years old.
And first major league camp, any distinct memories that flow through you?
Yeah, my first major league camp was with the Oakland A's in 1994.
So with the Jays, it was always minor league camp, and it wasn't until gotcha. So when you break camp, when you get to the major league camp with Oakland, you've already been called up.
Oh yeah, I've already been in the big leagues for 6 weeks with them before I had my first spring training with the big league team. So
that's like cart and horse,
I guess. I mean, it's a little bit different, right? Guys usually go to big league camp just to get their feet wet and have an understanding of what it is. But I never had that opportunity, and that was okay. I just went about my business in the minor league camp and had fun with the guys and just pitched.
Any meeting with Mr. Van Poppel?
I played with Todd Van Poppel in 1993 when I got traded over to the Oakland A's. He got called up. I was up there, and then 1994 we broke the rotation together.
And stories as far as interaction because of the draft year, and you guys ended up together. How was it? As far as the camaraderie there.
Oh, we were fine. It was great. I mean, when you have guys who are teammates, you talk about a whole bunch of different things, but the draft never really came up between us. I mean, he had, his journey or his road that he was going to take, and he ended up signing, and I had mine. And we didn't know each other then. We never had any of these perfect game things that we played against each other. So, he was a teammate, one that you root for, and you go to battle with every fifth day when you're playing in the big leagues.
So no emails to him at retirement saying, haha, I lasted longer than you.
No emails. I didn't really email anybody when I retired. It was get in my car and come home and have an understanding of, you know what, I played for a very long time. I did the best I could. I competed at a high level, and I gave everything I had.
Oh, we'll be talking about that in the future chapter, my friend. Don't worry, that's coming. So that was a great way to segue to the end of chapter 10. We're going to take a pause here, and then we'll come back to chapter 11 with a mystery chapter that Steve does not know what's coming. Stay tuned.